Thank you, Prof. Heng. May I now invite Mr. Cheng Tai Fat, Deputy Managing Director, BCA Academy, to say a few words. Mr. Cheng, please. Sure.
Can you hear me from behind? Or near the mic? Oh, this one. Okay. Yeah, I'd just like to thank Prof. Heng and SD for this invitation to basically share a view on this Singapore BIM roadmap. So basically, I'll just give you an update of the BIM roadmap. This will be the outline of my presentation. I'll just first share with you what is the first BIM roadmap, what are some of the key achievements under this roadmap, and then give you a sense of the adoption landscape since we started the journey. And then Prof. Heng just now mentioned about the international panel of experts. So I just share with you some of the experts' recommendations and what are the kind of gap analysis that we do. And through the IP recommendation and gap analysis, how we move on to the second BIM roadmap. So that's the outline of my presentation. Okay, the first BIM roadmap was actually formulated in 2010. I think the objective of that first BIM roadmap was actually focused on getting the industry to have a wide adoption of BIM by the year 2015. And some of the things that we did to get the industry to move towards this wide adoption is that we set some mandatory BIM e-submission targets, which Prof. Heng mentioned just now, starting with the architects in July 2013, and last year, July 2014, that requirement was extended to the structural and MEP. And by July this year, all new projects greater than 5,000 square meters had to be submitted in a BIM format. So that's some of the things that we did. Okay. So under the first BIM roadmap, we look at the challenges and come up with the strategies to address those challenges. And then some challenges are, at that point in time, was lack of demand for BIM, the entrenched behavior in 2D practice, the lack of ready pool of skilled BIM manpower, and also the additional resources that is needed to build up BIM expertise. And the challenges today, more or less, still remain the same. Okay. So for those in 2010, based on those challenges, we identified these strategies. The first one is the public sector taking the lead, and I also mentioned to you just now that under that strategy, one of the things that we did was to do the mandatory BIM submission. We also promote success stories through a lot of publications, seminars and workshops, etc. And so formulate a strategy to remove impediments, how to build up your BIM capability and capacity, and also to incentivize BIM adoption. So those were the 5 strategies that we put up under the first BIM roadmap. So what we have achieved since 2010 is that about 102 GPE stand for government procurement entities, have adopted BIM, and 115 projects have met the mandatory BIM e-submissions. And then we have also developed, together with the industry, the universities, on a Singapore BIM guide and the 6 essential guides. All this documentation, the BIM guide and 6 essential guide, can be found on the BCA website. And about 17 million has been committed to 650 firms through the so-called part of the CPCF BIM funding. For those from the industry, I hope that you are aware of this BIM fund. Okay? For those who are not aware, this BIM funding can support up to 50% of your software cost, your hardware acquisition, and also your training. So we actually funded up to 50% for you to embark on the BIM journey. Under the first so-called CPCF fund, I think we have more or less almost used up the BIM fund. But as Prof. Heng mentioned, the BCA is working to get the second tranche, and hopefully it's a bigger pool of funding. So we will still wait for the news to be announced. And we have also trained about 7,000 professionals together with the solution providers. And also 2,000 students trained before graduation. And for the students, actually we work very closely with the various IHL to make sure that the students have at least some minimum competency before they actually graduate. So these are some of the key achievements that we have under the first BIM roadmap. Okay, now I come to the adoption landscape. This one shows you the so-called public sector panel of consultant. You can see panel 1, panel 2, panel 3. P1, P2 are basically the larger firms. You can see from the figures that most of the larger firms have already embarked on BIM. So at the consultant level, I think in terms of BIM adoption, we are quite okay, but we will try to spend more time on the smaller firms. This is for the consultant. And for the contractors, again, if you look from the figures, the bigger contractors, majority of them, 70% above, are actually using BIM for most of their projects. I think the challenge for us is to really look at the smaller firms going forward. So that's generally the adoption landscape in Singapore. It's not too bad compared to overseas, as far as I know. Okay, so let me talk about the BIM IP recommendations. IP stands for International Panel of Experts. When we formulated the first BIM roadmap in 2010, I think in 2011 we hold our first BIM panel of experts. This panel of experts, I think about 6 or 7 of them, all these are from the so-called the gurus from the various countries overseas. So we bring them to Singapore and have some kind of discussion, also with the industry involved, to look at the roadmap that we have implemented and see whether there are any gaps or not. And then we actually have the second IP, I think, in 2013. Okay, and what I'm going to share with you is based on the second IP recommendations. What are the new things that we want to put in place? The things highlighted in yellow are some of the new focus area that we want to embark on under the second BIM roadmap. We need to look at BIM for facility and asset management. That means more the downstream activities. Because in terms of the construction value change, I think the design and construction only take about 3 to 4 years. But to operate and maintenance, you are really talking about 30 to 50 years. So the rich information that has been built up in the upstream stage, I think somehow or rather today we have not been able to capitalize on those information. So those are the things that we want to look at. Basically BIM for facility and asset management. And also how to accelerate process transformation. I think this is basically one of the MOU that has been signed between Building Smart Singapore and NUS, right? Under the MOU, I think one of the key things that you want to look at is how to accelerate process transformation. Again, we are looking at the whole construction value change. I think we have to move away, or we should be moving away from the silo activities to more the collaboration and integrated good practices. And this is something that we have to do with some sense of urgency, because our productivity has not been improving as much as we wanted to. Okay? Then the last part, I think Prof. Hing has also mentioned on the BIM R&D. I think this is something that we also want to focus a little bit more under the second BIM roadmap. I think one intent is that we also want to build up local expertise and competency in this area. So we want to invest some money into this BIM R&D. And I think the setting up of the Center of Excellence NUS-NTU is a good step. Actually, I'm looking to set up more COEs with other universities in Singapore. Yeah. Okay, we also did some gap analysis, looking at the various disciplines and basically what is the kind of challenges they have. You look at the developers, I think today they are a little bit detached from the BIM process and also basically lacking the know-how on how to drive the BIM forward. For the consultant, what we observe today is that because we have set this mandatory BIM e-submission requirement, a lot of time that the consultants spend on is just doing BIM for the purpose of submission. So we also want to change the mindset on that. And also I think they also lack time to perform design coordination because of the pressure, I understand, from the consultant, pressure from the developers to get the design approved as early as possible. Okay? Because doing BIM and doing traditional 2D practice is a very different set of exercise altogether. And I think for the consultant especially, more time need to be spent on what we call the front-loading activity. I think for the main contractors, I think one of the main vibes they have is that the lack of quality model from the consultants. Okay? Again, like I mentioned earlier, maybe the consultant only focus on the BIM e-submission. And really the richness of the model may not be adequate for the contractor to build up for the construction purpose. And currently they are also not able to maximize the full potential of BIM, right, to resolve issues with consultant and subcontractor, not because of the technology, but I think mainly on the lack of competence to be able to communicate and coordinate with the various parties. So again, this is one area that we also want to look at, not just focusing on BIM technology alone, but using the technology, how can you better leverage on ICT and other tools to coordinate and communicate with your so-called other team members. And for the specialist subcontractor, which is a very important component of the whole process, is the lack of BIM skill currently. This is mainly onto the MAP consultants. And then for the FM, it's the lack of BIM usage for facility management. I think FM is also a very challenging area because today FM, you can see that the kind of personnel that are involved in the FM facilities, I think moving forward, we probably have to find a way, working with the FM industry, to level up the professional level of this group of people. Okay. Then the other group analysis that we did based on the firms that use our BIM fund is that most of them actually use it for activities within their firm. Only 20% of those firms that they use our BIM fund for the projects use it for collaboration. So we want to spend a lot more effort on how to increase the degree of collaboration for those firms that use our BIM fund moving forward. Okay, so under the second beam roadmap, what we want to do is that we want to have a better integration among all the parties across the value chain. And these are some of the new areas that we want to look at, how to drive beam collaboration throughout the value chain, how to build up beam capability of the specialist contractors. And we also look at the new training at all levels, research and development, design for manufacturing and assembly. This is one new area that we're looking at. And also beam for FM and of course smart building. You can't have a smart nation without a smart building, so we have to start from smart building first, go to district, then go to smart nation. Okay, so those are the focus area. So to drive beam collaboration throughout the value chain, like I mentioned, we have a beam fund under the CPCF funding. The utilization is almost close to the finish. We are looking at a second tranche. So under the second tranche, what we want to do is that we hope to increase the funding level for those companies that use the beam fund for the purpose of collaboration. So under the first beam funding, we say we will subsidize up to 50% of the cost. For those that use the beam technology for collaboration, I think we are prepared to go up to 70% instead of 50% to give that the more incentive for people that actually use it for the purpose of collaboration. We'll also be reviewing the Singapore Beam Guide and the public sector beam requirements to include beam coordination and model handover. This is quite important because today, I think there is no good guide to tell people what are the information that's important for the various disciplines to build and how you actually hand over from one stage to the other. So we're actually working with industry to look at this beam coordination and model handover requirements. And we also currently review the procurement method and contractual conditions so that for those companies that embark on this beam collaboration, there will be a set of good practice contractual requirements that has been prepared, and you can actually use that for your project. This one we actually get a lawyer to help us craft this. And the last one is that we want to work towards a beam-based regulatory submission and approval. What it means is that today you submit the beam submission for regulatory approval, and I think under the beam e-submission, the agency still asks you all to so-called prepare the 2D sectional view or whatever view for the purpose of submission. What we want to work towards is that we want to so-called remove the need for the consultant to prepare extra work, which means you only submit the 3D beam model and nothing else. This is what we hope to work towards. We're still not too sure about the feasibility, so that's why we are doing some pilot at the moment, right? The advantage, if we can do that, is that if the consultant only submit a 3D beam model for approval, the natural tendency is that downstream, the contractor will also have to use the approved 3D beam model for the construction works. So in that way, I think we also cut down this application of effort to produce 2D construction drawing for the contractor. But this one we are actually doing a pilot, so we have to, through the pilot, we will iron out some of the technical challenges first. Okay, building beam capability of specialist contractor. I mentioned we increased the level of funding for 50 to 70% for those firms that embark on collaboration. For the specialist contractor, we are also thinking to increase from 50% to 70% just to get them on board. Because specialist contractor, I think in terms of the HVAC, stuff like that, I think it's quite a complicated exercise. But it's important that they come on board. So we also want to do that through this incentivizing them further. And we also want to introduce training on topics like design to fabrication and installation. Some of these things, of course, we will work very closely with the universities on the process. New training programs at all levels. I think some of the things that we have already done is that we have looked at organizing our programs at technical level, middle management level, and leadership level. I think last year we actually have a collaboration with Stanford Sci-Fi to look at this virtual design and construction program for the middle management and the so-called CEO level. I think these two programs are quite successful. Each run we have about 20 odd firms that went for this program. It's about a 1-week program in Stanford itself. And we are also starting the next run this year. For the middle management, we are targeting in July, and then for the CEO level, we are targeting in November. So for those that are interested, please watch out for this. Okay, research and development, I think Prof. Heng has mentioned, we are actually putting in some BIM R&D fund under the second tranche. Okay. And we also want to develop localized, customized BIM apps to improve productivity. So these are ongoing efforts. Okay, BIM for this manufacturing and assembly. Basically, we are in the process of developing a BIM guide for DFMA. And I think we have worked with one of the other university, NTU and HDB, on one of this project to look at the prefabrication process, starting from design all the way to so-called assembly. And through that pilot, I think we are also crafting out this BIM guide for DFMA. And of course, I mentioned about BIM for facility management and smart building. BCA itself has actually piloted a project on this BIM FM. Basically, what we're going to do is that we are envisaging that in future, FM, so-called officer or engineer, just need to carry a tablet around. All the information about our buildings will be inside a tablet, so he can do his analysis on the site, issue a works order all through the tablet. He can actually use his tablet to view the BIM model, stuff like that. So we have started, we finished the pilot actually, and now we are preparing a BIM for FM guide. Hopefully it can be used for the building owners. And then through that guide, they can stipulate the requirements into their standard specification, so that for that project, from the very start, in the conceptualizing and the design part, people will know that the information need to be used for FM. So those are the things that we want to do. And more important is that we also hope that our target is by this year to be able to get the so-called guide ready, so that the public sector can use it to stipulate as a tender requirements in all public sector projects. I mean, that's the target for this year. We hope to get public sector to take the lead to make sure that they do specify these FM requirements up front in all the new building projects. And the other thing that we do, and we are continuing doing, is to do all these outreach programs, BIM awards, BIM competition, etc. Okay, in a nutshell, I think for the second BIM roadmap, these are the kind of focus area that we are going to embark on. Right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chen.